Hello everyone, welcome to my stop on the Lawn Fawn fans fall YouTube hop. We are a group of crafters who love Lawn Fawn so much that each season we come together to show you our work in hopes to inspire you while you craft. For those of you who haven't seen me before, my name is Steph and I am a paper crafter from Queensland, Australia. Today I'm going to be showing you how I made this adorable pop-up card using a bunch of my favourite Lawn Fawn stamps and dies. Just before we get started, I'm so excited to announce that Lawn Fawn themselves are sponsoring this hop today. So there is a $25 gift voucher up for grabs. I will tell you a little bit more on how to go in the draw for that a little later on. For now, let's have a look at what I planned on using to make this card. Every time I start a card, I grab out all my stamp sets that I think might have an image or a bunch of images that I will use on a card, and I flick through them kind of over and over again until I decide on all my pieces and have the scene planned out in my head. So as you can see here today, there's going to be a lot of mice, and there's going to be a lot of bits and pieces like crystals, a cauldron, books, everything I need to make a little magical scene. I'm going to be using my window frame die for the first time today. Here is a photo of all the stamp sets that I pulled out that I was planning on using. I know it's a lot, but I've been collecting Lawn Fawn for a couple of years now, and if you do too, then I'm sure you've noticed that all of the sets have tiny little elements that you kind of can't live without. And with this card, I ended up using some of the older stamp sets I own with some of my brand new ones, which is one of the things that I love about this brand. Everything can be used together. Here I am stamping out those tiny words for the spines of my books, and I'm also stamping a few other spooky little things like bats in jars, and then of course my mice. If you've seen my work before, then you know how much I love my Lawn Fawn mice. They pop up in so many of my cards, and I just couldn't resist using them for this card too. I did originally plan on this one being cats, but they're much bigger characters, and I figured I could fit more mice on this one. Here is my colour scheme for today. It's very basic, it's very Halloween, which I love, especially with the weather getting so hot here. It's so nice to look at all of the fall inspiration. It just reminds me of the weather I enjoy instead of the weather I am sitting through. And it just so happened that it was really hot when I filmed this card, and by the end of the night when I was finishing assembling it, it was storming. Which is perfect spooky weather and goes really well with my theme. It would just be nice if it wasn't so humid. So along with my greys, oranges and yellow for my colour scheme, I decided to add some red, which I know is probably a little bit unusual and not very Halloween-like, but I had an idea in my head that these little mice were maybe little witches and wizards, and I immediately thought of Harry Potter, which is my favourite movie series, and thought that I would have these little mice with different house colours, and then I realised that would be too many colours. And I have a tendency to go overboard with colour schemes, so I thought I would rein it in just a little bit and just use the yellow and red to kind of make it look like Gryffindor colours. They're not my colours, but I thought just adding red to this colour scheme wasn't too much of a shock. It wasn't too different. It kind of rounded out my colour palette, and as you can see as we go along, this goes really well with all of the other elements that I make along the way. With my colouring today, as always, I'm using a mix of both Copic markers and my regular alcohol markers. I don't go too overboard with blending and making things too fancy, as I have a lot of colouring here to get through, so most of the time I just use two shades, a dark one and a light one, and I'm blending them together. And while I am doing this, I thought now is the perfect time to remind you that this hop is sponsored by Lawn Fawn, which is just so exciting. We absolutely love all of our sponsors that we've had so far, and it's always really special when Lawn Fawn jump on board too. So Lawn Fawn is giving away a $25 gift voucher to their online store, and all you have to do to go in the draw is hop along to all of the stops and leave us a comment. I would love to know in the comments where you're from and what your favourite Halloween lolly or candy is. I'll be reading and replying to all of the comments so that you know that you are in the draw. We will be picking a winner on the 23rd of this month, so make sure you're checking everyone's socials around that time to see if you're the winner. Once all my colouring was done, it was then time to grab my favourite Jelly Roll pens in size 0.8 and size 1 to add my white highlights to all of my images. I'm also taking a page out of one of my favourite crafters' handbooks, Maureen Simon, and I'm adding some extra white details on these to make them look a little sparkly. I do this simply by drawing little crosses on some of the images. It's such a small detail, but I've seen her do it so many times and I wanted to give it a go myself, and I love how it turned out. Moving on to creating the rest of this scene. So as you can see, I've got my desk and my window cut out with some dark grey cardstock. It was a really bright day when I was filming, so it looks a little bit lighter than it does in person. And I'm going over the edges of this one with just a little bit of my black soot Distress Oxide ink. Even though my cardstock is textured and it's really beautiful to work with, I do love adding bits of ink around the edges just to add a little bit more depth. Today I'm going to be using one of my favourite Lawn Fawn stencils, and I really feel like I don't use this one enough. So I was really excited to get it out today and try something a little bit different. I'm going in with some mustard seed, spiced marmalade, and candied apple first, just doing patches of each of these colours all over my background. Once these are done, I'm then coming back in with my black soot and going over the remaining white areas and blending a little bit into my colours. Although I love how bright these colours are, I did want to dull them down to make this room look a bit more spooky. Once I had taken my stencil off, I then decided to add a little bit more texture to this background by taking each of those inks, popping a little bit onto my mat, watering it down and sprinkling it over the top. This ties all the colours in together, fills in some of those white gaps, and just creates that cool effect of the water reacting with the oxide inks. This stencil doesn't quite go all the way to the edges of my card. So what I do in the end is take my stencil off and just go over the edges with my black soot again. There isn't any brick detailing on the very edge of the card, but having that black ink there does really tie everything together. With such nice detail in the top half of my card, the bottom was looking a little bit bare. So I grabbed an old wood grain stencil out of my stash and just did a little bit of black soot on the bottom so that this didn't feel so bright white up against that background. Moving on to my window die. I have seen this used a couple of times as a bookshelf already, and that is one of the main reasons I bought this die. It is just such a beautiful die. I really can't wait to use it as a window too. But for now, I'm trimming it just over halfway to create a shelf for all of my bits and pieces. Before I get too far into decorating, I thought I would stamp my sentiment in now, and only now, while recording this voiceover, I have noticed that I've made a little bit of a mistake in this card. I've used the word "you're" twice. Oops. That's okay, I'm sure I can stick something cute over one of them before I give this card to someone. While I'm here, I'm going to be adding, I guess, a mat or a rug using one of my stitched rectangles that I've trimmed down. And now we get to stick on the desk, which is always one of my favourite parts as it really means that this scene is coming along. So I'm going to be sticking the back part of my desk on first, and this is so that I can play around with it while the glue is still wet and ensure that my window frame / bookshelf is going to fit nicely behind there. I'm then going to add some tape runner to those little supporting pieces that hold my desk up, and then I'm going to close my card and let them adhere. When I open my card, my desk should be glued in the perfect position. Moving on to setting my scene, and just before we do, I thought I would show you a close-up of these little images. I was a little bit obsessed with them. They turned out so beautiful. I just love this colour scheme. And now it's time to start assembling the scene. So first up, I'm going to be gluing my little hats on my mice. I like to do all these little bits and pieces before I put them into my full scene, just so that everything is dry, so I can play around with the entire finished character, knowing exactly how much space it's going to take up. I do, however, still make mistakes, as you will see very soon. I got a little bit excited with putting the mouse behind the cauldron, with his big pointy hat on, and when I fold my card, he pokes out just a little bit. So if you're going to make a scene like this, make sure you open and close your card so many times to make sure that everything is well hidden and fits. I'm going to leave you with just a little music as I finish setting the scene. Now that the inside of my card is finished, it's time to do a very quick decoration on the front of this card. I always feel like with so much going on the inside of these, I don't need to go too overboard for the outside. So I'm simply sprinkling some Distress Oxide inks in the same colours that I used on the inside on the front of my card. I'm also going to be using some orange cardstock and a stitch scallop circle that I have sprinkled some gold watercolour pigment on to decorate the front. Here I'm adding some double-sided tape to this strip of cardstock, and this is going to go across the centre of my card front. I had stamped so many images for the inside of my card that not all of them fit, so these are actually leftover pieces that I'm using to whip up this tiny little scene for the front. I feel like this gives a hint as to what will be on the inside when this card is opened up. Once that little scene was adhered to the front of my card with a few foam squares, it was then time to open it up and have a look. I just love this card. All these little details were just so much fun to create, and I feel like the scene came together really well. If you enjoyed my stop on this hop, then please give this video a thumbs up, and please subscribe if you haven't already to see what I make next. Don't forget to put your comment below, and good luck with the draw. I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.